I want to thank the Lord so much for bringing, let me first of all mention Becky Pippert, or as I called her for many years, Rebecca Manley Pippert. And I am so grateful for all that the Lord has done in her life. Her books are invaluable. I've used them in discipleship. I told her it was such a blessing to find out she would be able to be here. You'll get a chance to hear her tonight and also in the Q&A. And ladies, I know yesterday and today you were blessed. So it's wonderful to have you here, Becky. Along with your husband, Dick, would you stand so that we can give y'all personally a Briarwood welcome? Thank you so, so much. And then, so we'll have a chance to interact with her again tonight, and Greg Kokel. Now, he's no stranger because we've been having him here with his organization, Ministry Stand to Reason. You know, his radio, media ministry, all of that. And one of the most wonderful things is he's talking to us about engaging. He does it regularly. Public forums, debates, media, and over 70 colleges, engagement, working with academicians, professors, students, administrators, and in other forums as well. But I don't want to take any more time. His books are valuable. He's going to tell you about one of them that I've really enjoyed reading in preparation for this conference this week. And so it's wonderful to have Greg with us. He has been here, as we've said, for our conferences with thousands of our students over the last 2 years, looking at next year as well. And now we're looking forward to what he's been able to do for us here. So would y'all give to Greg Kokel a Briarwood welcome. Greg, come and hold forth the word of life.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you, brother. Thank you. Well, I'm finally waking up here. My third round this morning. I told the first service that I'm not really a morning person. I was creaking around like this, and my hips give me a little trouble too. I'm also 2 hours time warp from Los Angeles, so that's okay. I'm starting to get my vigor up. One woman said, "Mr. Kokel, you must have a great quiet time in the morning." I said, "Frankly, ma'am, before my first cup of coffee, I'm an atheist." So I had a little coffee before that first service, and I told him I was a Jehovah's Witness because it hadn't all gotten into my system. Now I think I'm a Christian. I get to speak at a lot of conferences that are apologetics type of conferences where they have the smart folks that come in with the PhDs and the academics and give lots of really good information. And one of the great things about being a part of a lot of those around the country, and there's a lot of them now, they're getting more and more, is you realize there is not a challenge that has been offered to Christianity that has not been answered by someone thoughtful who has worked through the issues with the evidence to give an answer for the hope that's within us. That's really encouraging. That's why these conferences are so popular. And I think that's one of the reasons the Rethink conference that we did here in the spring and last spring was so popular. 1,800 students that came in, and only about, I'd say about a half of those people were from the state of, what state are we in? Alabama? Alabama. The rest of them came from outside. I mean, it all converging here. So it just shows that our young people really care about that. And we have a commitment to the next generation, because my view is that the most important generation is always the next generation. We want to hand that baton over. And tonight I'll be talking a little bit about some ideas from the scripture about passing that baton. But today I want to talk a little bit about why I get invited to these other conferences, partly because after somebody goes through the conference and listens to all the talks, they just get a little overwhelmed, you know. So much information, like the guy in the Far Side cartoon has got the, he's in a classroom and has got the calculations on the board. It's a math class or something. He said, "Professor, could I please be excused? My brain is full." You know, you just get overwhelmed with all that information. And there's a problem with those conferences. And the problem is you get all this information, but you don't get really a good delivery method. That is, there is a missing bridge from the content to the conversation, or say from the scholarship to the relationship. And they have me come in, usually to give the last session, to provide what I'm going to provide for you this morning in kind of a whittled down manner, kind of a shorter version, all right? I want to provide you that bridge so you can take whatever you have learned from Pastor Reader, from your classes, from books that you read, from conferences that you might go to, whatever it has to do about the substance of Christianity or the defense of Christianity or the gospel itself. How do you get that into play in conversations? But to lead off here, I want to say something that's a little controversial. It's going to lay a little bit of a foundation for you as to how we're going to move forward. And this controversial thing is things that some Christians don't agree with, and that's all right. But I stand strong behind it because I've seen the impact of it, okay? So let me just say it here, and then I'll explain what I'm getting at. I never have it as a goal whenever I'm talking with somebody about spirit in a conversation that I hope will eventually get to spiritual things. I never have it as a goal to lead that person to Christ. In fact, I don't even have it as a goal to necessarily get to the gospel. Now, you might be wondering, don't I care if that person becomes a Christian? Of course I do. Well, don't you need the gospel for that? Absolutely. The gospel is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. However, I became a Christian during the Jesus movement, back 45 years ago or so. And back then, evangelism was pretty straightforward, pretty easy. You go out among the people, you share some simple characterization of the gospel, and then you see if they can get them to sign on the dotted line. You close the deal. They pray to receive Christ. And then you come back afterwards. You know what I'm talking about. You come back afterwards and say, hey, I've got 3 decisions or 4 decisions, or these people trusted the Lord or whatever, and that's all great. The problem is, times have changed. It's not that easy anymore. The culture has gotten radically different. The gospel is no longer simple. I mean, it is still the simple gospel, but people don't understand it when you say it's simple. They don't have the resources to make sense of that anymore. And so there's a lot more of what Francis Schaeffer used to call pre-evangelism that is required now to get people ready for receiving that message and responding to that message. And so coming out of that environment, I have had to do a lot of adjustments in the way I engage people. Now I don't think of evangelism so much. I think of being an ambassador. In other words, I want my involvements with people who don't know Christ to look more like genial diplomacy than D-Day, okay? And sometimes it's a little bit complicated and the fireworks are going off, okay? I want that to be more of a pleasant thing. So as I'm going through this transition from Jesus movement to now over the years, something began to dawn on me that I want to share with you. It's a little aphorism, a little saying, but it really carries punch if you apply it in your life. And here it is. Before there can be any harvest, there has always got to be a season of, let's just call it gardening. Before there can be a harvest, there's got to be a season of gardening, okay? Now, this is pretty straightforward and it's common sense, but a lot of times we don't think of this because we have inherited kind of an approach to evangelism, which is a simple gospel, close the deal type approach. And there are times when the harvest is ready, but lots of times it's not. I want you to think for just a moment about Jesus in John chapter 4. In John chapter 4, that's the woman at the well. So it's a well-known passage, and we talk a lot about the engagement of Jesus with the woman. There's a lot to learn there. But I want you to think for a moment of what happens after she goes away, and she goes out to Sychar to tell the people there that she's talked to a man that told her everything about her life, and maybe this is the Messiah. Because the disciples then come in, and they've been out getting some food, and Jesus says to them, you say that there are 6 months or 4 months and then comes the harvest. I say to you, look on the field because the field is white with harvest. No, I don't think Jesus was saying every field is always white with harvest. I think he was saying that field, Sychar, was ready. And he was probably referring to the people in their white robes kind of coming across the field being led by the woman at the well. And he tells the disciples, you are about to harvest where you did not sow. Okay, you're going to reap, you didn't sow. Somebody else did the sowing. Somebody else did the heavy lifting. You get to pick the low-hanging fruit. And of course, if you think about harvest time, when the fruit is ripe, it just falls into the basket. It's ready to go. The harvesting is easy and it's quick if the preparation work, the gardening, has been done first. And as I began to look over my life, I realized as I look back, even though I'm a talk show host and a writer and a public speaker, most of what I do is not harvesting. Most of what I do is gardening. I'm out there gardening here, gardening there, gardening. Now, people tell me that they become Christians as a result of the impact of things that we've done through Stand to Reason or something I've written or whatever, a radio show. And I'm glad to hear that. But in those cases, I wasn't the one who harvested. Somebody else went into my garden and harvested my crop. Now, let me ask you a question. You think I care? No, I don't care. I'm not going to say, get out of my garden. I'm going to say, you're welcome to it. Why? Because we're all on the same team. And Jesus told the disciples there in John chapter 4 that some are going to reap and some are going to sow, and that's okay because those who sow and those who reap can rejoice together. That's great. So what Jesus is saying is there's one field and there's one team, but there are two seasons and there are two kinds of workers. There are those who sow and those who reap in their appropriate times. Now, I have a suspicion as I'm looking out in this church, knowing that when the harvest is ripe, that it's easy, and that a lot of time and more than ever now is required for gardening, that most people in this church are probably not harvesters. Most of you, I suspect, are gardeners. Now, if you're listening to what I say, and this doesn't resonate with you, and you're getting a little bugged, and you say, well, that guy doesn't share the gospel, he doesn't try to win people to Christ, what's going on with that? And there's some of you feeling that right now. Well, you're probably a harvester. All the rest of you are going, wow, I like what he's saying, because now I feel like I've got a place in the project. I can play in the program. I can be a gardener. That's exactly right. And so what I want to talk about for the rest of my time this morning, I want to talk about gardening. Because I have got a game plan that allows me to garden effectively. And so here's my promise to you for the next, 30 minutes? Yeah, 30 minutes that we have together. I was looking at the seconds and it looked like the minutes. I said, I'm almost done. Here's my promise. I am going to give you a game plan that will allow you to converse with confidence in any situation, no matter how little you know, or how knowledgeable, or aggressive, or even obnoxious the other person happens to be. It's a game plan that trades on something that Paul says in Colossians chapter 4, verse 5 and 6. So just mark that passage. I'll repeat it for you right now. You can look it up if you want. Colossians 4, verse 5 and 6, this is our springboard. This is our core for what I want to say. Here's what Paul says there. He says, conduct yourselves with wisdom towards outsiders, making the most of the opportunity. So the first thing he says is to be smart. Good. Okay. Then he says, let your speech always be with grace, seasoned as it were with salt. Oh. So we should be smart and we should be nice. What a concept. And then he adds this, so that you know how to respond to each person. In other words, we should be smart, we should be nice, but we also should be tactical. We have to be able to maneuver in our circumstances so that we're adjusting to the individual people where they're at with what they happen to believe, whatever that happens to be, based on our ability in that moment to make a contribution. That's basically what he's saying. And that's what I want to talk about here. So let me give you an example of how this worked out in my own life. Now, I'm from Chicago originally. I've been in California for 47 years or something, so I'm almost a native. That was a joke. Still too early for some of you, okay. But my grandpa bought some property in northern Wisconsin to retire at. It's on a lake there. It's a very humble place, a little cottage kind of thing. It's pretty run down. It's mine now, but I've been going up there since I was a kid, and I like to fish. and I especially like to bass fish. And I know you folks here in Birmingham know what that's all about. This is like the bass fishing capital of the world kind of thing. And I've been to Gunnersville and stuff. You know, if I have more time, I bring my rods and I go out. And I like to, up in northern Wisconsin, I like to fish for smallmouth bass, not the largemouth bass. And one day I went out with a local pastor. I caught the largest smallmouth bass of my life at the time. That was 4 pounds, 2 ounces. And I was really proud of that fish. It was a beauty. And it's a pretty big fish, a big smallie for that neck of the woods. Now, I just got to tell you that since that time, I got 8 fish, smallmouth, over 5. Just saying. In fact, there was one smallmouth that was 5.13. If he had just eaten another crawdad, he'd have pushed over 6. But in any event, I was really proud of that fish, so I had a picture taken, and I wanted to get it digitized so I could show it up on the screen at that pastor's church where I'll be teaching the next weekend. I'm flexing my muscles because folks up there in the North Country, they understand that kind of thing, as you do. Fishermen. Okay. Now, so I had to take that film and get it to film. F-I-L-M. Film, the stuff we took, and we get it developed. So I could put that picture on the screen, and there was a gal that was there at the counter processing the film. She had a big pentagram hanging from her neck. It was like a 5-pointed star. Now, these are often occultic symbols. And I noticed it, so I asked her about it. I said, does that jewelry have religious significance? She said, it does. The 5 points stand for earth, wind, fire, water, and spirit. And so the bells are going off in my head. You know, this is familiar to me. But I wanted some clarification. I said, does that have religious significance for you personally? Because some people wear a cross and it's just jewelry, right? And she said, yes, it does. I'm a pagan. And now, I'm a trained professional, right? And I'm just taking all of this in. But my wife is standing next to me. And when this gal calls herself a pagan, it caught my wife by surprise, and she started laughing. And then she caught herself. She said, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to be rude, but I never heard anybody admit it before, is what she said. She'd only heard the word pagan when her girlfriends would call her kids in, you know, get in here, you bunch of pagans, you know, that kind of thing. Well, the gal wasn't upset. She just went on to explain it's an earth religion. And as she's talking, I realized that I'm talking to a witch. And so I asked her, are you Wiccan? And she said, yes, I am. And then she says, we respect all life, which is a major theological tenet of Wiccan. So I said, well, if you respect all life, then that would probably make you pro-life regarding the abortion question. She said, no, really, I'm pro-choice. I said, really? That's kind of odd for a witch to be pro-choice, isn't it? And she said, well, I guess it is. But then she added this. She said, I know I could never do that, referring to abortion. I could never kill a baby. Those were her words. Now, at Stand to Reason, we have training material where we train pro-lifers to make the case that abortion takes the life of an innocent human being without proper justification. Baby killing, if you will, but that's not the language we teach people to use. We don't want the other side to think we're trying to make our points with rhetoric rather than with a good argument, okay? But now I'm not the person using the baby killing language to describe abortion. It is the person who is pro-choice that is describing abortion as baby killing. And guess what? I'm paying attention. I'm listening. So do you think I'm going to use the word abortion anymore in this conversation? No. She has just legitimized the phrase baby killing. That's the phrase I'm going to use. So she says, I could never do that. I could never kill a baby. And then she gave the reasons why. She said, I wouldn't want something bad to come back on me. I guess it's a kind of a karma thing. What goes around comes around. I'm not sure exactly how she was thinking, but it did strike me as an odd reason not to kill babies. It's like, I'm not going to kill any baby. You never know what's going to happen to you when you start killing babies. And I'm thinking maybe it's just a good idea not to kill babies regardless, you know. But anyway, I didn't pursue that point. Instead, I said, well, maybe you wouldn't kill babies, good. But maybe we should stop other people from killing babies. And she said, well, I think people should have a choice. Now, what is the choice that we are talking explicitly about right now? The choice to kill babies. Yeah, exactly. That's what I asked her. You mean people should have a choice to kill babies? She said, well, I think everything should be taken into consideration. I said, okay, what would be a legitimate consideration to make it okay to kill a baby? And she said, incest. Okay, now let me see. You know what's going on here? She is just trotting out all the pro-choice slogans, all right? And the thing is, though, she has already identified abortion as baby killing. So all the slogans for choice turn out to be slogans for baby killing. And it's starting to sound a little bit weird, but she doesn't see it. And I'll tell you why, because she's not listening. All she's doing is trotting out the slogans. Now, when you engage with other people on spiritual things, you're going to hear lots and lots and lots of slogans that they have never thought about. They are just repeating what other people said. This insight is going to be very important for you as you employ your game plan, okay? But I want you to see something else. The non-believers aren't the only ones who trot out slogans without thinking about them. We do it all the time. And so it turns out we're just sloganeering back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, instead of listening to each other and actually having a substantive conversation about the things themselves. So I asked her a question. I said, if I had a 2-year-old standing next to me that was, I'm thinking, I didn't have any children then, so I couldn't have my own baby. Now I got 2 daughters. I got a 13-year-old, and I got a 10-year-old. I know what you're thinking. He's an old guy. How did that happen? I can't remember. Well, how old is he? I can't remember that either. Let's just say I'm in my 4th Medicare year. That's how you count things when you get to this. What's that poor guy going to do when that 10-year-old becomes a teenager? If I'm lucky, I'll be dead. So I said, if I had a 2-year-old standing next to me here who had been conceived by incest, then on your view, I should be allowed to kill this child. Is that right? That stopped her in her tracks, and now she's thinking, maybe that's the point where I put a stone in her shoe, so to speak. I actually didn't talk about that yet, so I'll have to come back to it in just a moment. But it got her thinking. And then she said, well, I had mixed feelings about that. And I'm thinking, I hope so, at least mixed, that you wouldn't kill the 2-year-old, you know. But I got her thinking. Now, the line was forming behind me and growing, and so now I'm interfering with her work product. And I realize that now that my opportunity as an ambassador has come to an end. If I had been of a different persuasion about how to engage people about my own convictions, I might be tempted to say, wait a minute, I haven't got to the gospel yet. Sit down, shut up, maybe you learned something. But you see, I did not feel that artificial pressure to kind of get to the end game when it wasn't appropriate in the moment. Jesus didn't get to the end game every time. Sometimes you just said enough to annoy people, to get them thinking. And you see, this is kind of my new goal here. So when I now engage, I'm not looking to get people signing on the dotted line, okay? I have a different goal, and it's the same goal that I explain anytime that I go to a university setting and I give a lecture. I let them know what I'm about. And here's what I say. I say, I'm here tonight because my life has been deeply changed by an ancient teacher, and his name is Jesus of Nazareth. And 45 years or so ago, when I was a student at UCLA, I began to think about what Jesus said, the claims he made about himself, the claims he made about the world, and the claim he made on my own life. And I began to ask questions. In fact, I pushed back quite a bit. Then I let it sit for a while. Then I come back and push back some more. And after a while, back and forth, I finally came to the conclusion, I'm telling the students now, I finally came to the conclusion that Jesus got it right, that he saw the world the way it really was, and the smartest thing that I could do was to tuck in behind him and be a follower of Jesus. Now, I've been doing that for quite a while now, and it's not been easy, I tell them. It's been hard, but it's been reality. And I want to help others to follow Jesus too. But I tell the students, I'm not here tonight to convert you. I have a different goal. This is what I tell them. All I want to do tonight is I just want to put a stone in your shoe. I just want to annoy you a little bit. In a good way. I tell them I want you hobbling out of here with something I've said kind of sticking at you. So you're thinking about it. Because I am convinced that Jesus is worth thinking about. And then I go to my lecture material, and that's it. I move on forward. So I have as my goal now not to get to the end game. Sometimes they get there, sometimes they don't. I usually don't in my conversations with people. I'm doing something else. I'm gardening. I'm not harvesting. But I have a game plan to accomplish that. I want you to notice something about my conversation with the witch in Wisconsin. In that conversation, I asked 9 different questions. I asked questions to initiate the conversation. I asked her about her jewelry. I asked questions to gather more information about her point of view. I even used a question to try to exploit what I thought was a weakness or a flaw in her view. I trotted out the toddler. I talked about the 2-year-old regarding her views as abortion. I applied her rules to the 2-year-old, and that got her thinking, okay? And by the way, used to have in my notes, it said, and she was doing most of the work, which implies that I was doing some of the work, but she was doing the lion's share, but I wasn't doing any work. I was relaxed. I was calm. I wasn't having a fight. So I changed my notes and said she was doing all of the work. Then I realized she wasn't doing any work either, because she was relaxed and she was calm and she wasn't fighting. We weren't defending turf. There was no line drawn in the sand. Wow, what's not to like? This is the way I want it. I don't want to be fighting with people. My rule is if I get mad, I lose. Right? Pretty straightforward. What if I don't get mad, but they get mad? All right, if they get mad, I still lose. Hey, if anybody gets mad, I lose. So I want to try to avoid people getting mad in a conversation, because when people are angry, they're not easily persuaded. Incidentally, for no extra charge, that's a good principle in marriage. If anybody gets mad, I lose. Much harder to follow in marriage, though, but it's a good principle. No, I want my conversations to be relaxed and friendly and genial. I want my conversations to get them thinking. I want my conversations, if possible, it's not always possible, but to put a stone in their shoe. That's my goal. I'm not swinging for the fences. I'm not even trying to get on base. I'm just trying to get in the batter's box. And this is the power of a tactical approach. Now, at Stand to Reason, we have lots of tactics we use, and I've written a book about it. This is actually Pastor Eric's copy, well worn. Teaches a class on it, I think. You've had classes on it here. Tactics, a game plan for discussing your Christian convictions. I think there's some in the bookstore. We'll have some at the table also on the evening session tonight. But there are lots of tactics. They have names like suicide and taking the roof off, and just the facts, ma'am, and Rhodes Scholars. And these are all maneuvers that will allow you to stay in the driver's seat of the conversation. And see, that's the tactical goal. Okay? It isn't to manipulate people. It isn't to control people. It isn't to get the best of people and make them look stupid. That is not the purpose of this. The purpose is to manage the conversation so it goes in the direction that you want it to go, that you think will be most productive for your purposes of showcasing Christ or some aspect of the Christian worldview. And the tactics allow you to do that. Now, I mentioned some other tactics, and those are in the book if you want to get that. And they, in a certain sense, abet the main game plan. The main game plan is a tactic of its own. And it's the simplest tactic imaginable to stop an objector in their tracks, to turn the tables, to get them thinking, and to put you back in the driver's seat, all right? It's, pardon me, the tactic has a name, and the name is Columbo. Remember him, Lieutenant Columbo? Excuse me, from the TV show of decades past. I used to say 3 decades, but then my staff told me, no, you sound senile. It's actually 4. Okay. So Lieutenant Columbo, now how many remember Lieutenant Columbo? See, a lot of you folks, sure. He's an icon, right? Even if you're younger, a lot of folks know about him, see the reruns. He shows up in a trench coat, looks like he slept in it. I got mine at Salvation Army. My wife told me, whenever you get something at Salvation Army, you always want to check the pockets because you never know what you're going to find. Wait a minute, what's this? Oh my gosh, look at that. It's a cigar. Lieutenant Columbo has a cigar. Now look at, this is just a plastic one, so don't anybody get upset. Just so you know, I hate cigars. Whenever I get a real one, I always destroy it by fire. All the way down, I don't want anybody to stumble. Charles Spurgeon used to smoke cigars, you know. Some Christian gal said, isn't it wrong to smoke cigars? He said, no, as long as you don't smoke too many. Well, she said, how much is too many? He said, more than one at a time. So Columbo's got a cigar. He's also got a pad of paper, but he can't use his pad of paper. Why not? Because no pencil, no pen. You know, he's like bumming a pencil off of something. He's not prepared. And he walks around rubbing his brow, scratching his head, and this guy doesn't look like he can think his way out of a wet paper bag, right? This guy's stupid. But he's stupid like a fox because he's got a plan. And at some point, he'll just pause for just a moment, put his fingers to furrowed brow as if he's deep in painful thought, and then he'll say something like this. I don't know. There's something about this thing that bothers me. Do you mind if I ask you a question? Then he asks a question, right? And he gets the answer. Oh, you're very intelligent. Yeah. One more thing. And then he one more tings them to death, right? With question after question after question. Pretty soon the people get annoyed. And he says, I'm sorry. It's because I'm asking all these questions, but I can't help it. It's a habit. And this is a habit that you ought to get into. The key to the Columbo tactic, and therefore to the game plan, is that the Christian goes on the offensive in an inoffensive way with carefully selected questions to advance the conversation. Let me say that again. The key to the tactic and central to your game plan is you move forward, you go on the offensive, but not in a way that offends people, by using questions to advance your conversation. Okay, now why questions? A couple of reasons. For one, questions are polite. Okay? When you ask a question, you're showing an interest in another person. That's just good manners. I mean, as parents, we should teach that to our kids. You go into a conversation, you ask people about themselves. You show an interest in other people. And then it appears like you're a good conversationalist, even though the other person is doing all the talking, right? Interested is interesting. So it's good manners. Secondly, when you ask questions of somebody else, you're going to hopefully get some valuable information about what that person thinks and believes, how they think and what they believe, all right? And if you want to have a spiritual impact on them, that's absolutely vital. In fact, you cannot go forward without it. You can't go forward effectively or efficiently without having that basic information. I'll get to that in just a moment. The most important thing, though, or one of the most important things about using questions is that it puts you in the driver's seat of the conversation. I do talk radio. I've been doing it for 28 years, and people call in, and I use all these tactics, by the way. These and all the ones in the book. This is all from personal experience. You listen to the podcast, you'll see how this all plays out. But I also do interviews of authors. How do you make an author who writes a good book but isn't good on the air sound interesting? You ask them the right questions. So I can guide that conversation even though I'm not doing the most talking. I am still in charge of the interview, in a sense. I'm in the driver's seat. That conversation goes where I want it to go based on the questions that I ask. Okay, that's the power of questions, all right? So in the Columbo tactic, our game plan, there are actually 3 steps. 1, 2, 3. I only have time to give you the first 2 steps. The third step is an advanced step. But the first 2 steps are enough for me to fulfill my promise to you, okay? Here's the first step of the game plan. Now, when I say it's the first step of the game plan, what I mean is when you find yourself in a circumstance where you'd like to have a spiritual impact, I do not want you to think about leading that person to Christ. That's way down there, maybe. You don't know where that is, actually, because you don't know where that person is. Do not think about that. Think about the first step, okay? All you have to worry about is the first use of Columbo and the first step of the game plan is to gather information. There it is. Gather information. This gives you something to do right out of the gate when you don't know what to do. You start using questions to gather information about the person with whom you're talking. They may be a complete stranger. They may be somebody you've known for a while, but you don't know much about their spiritual life or their spiritual convictions. Okay? I was sitting on an airplane next to a guy named John. And usually you make small talk with people. And a lot of times people ask you where you're going or what are you doing or what do you do for a living. And I tell them what I do for a living. And I write and I speak and I do radio. And then they want to know what I write and speak on. And so this gives me an opportunity to talk to them a little bit about my own convictions and what I'm about and Christianity, whatever. Okay? So when I'm trying to find out more about John, John volunteered to me that he was not a Christian. Let me ask you a question. Is that good information for me to know? Absolutely. Okay? Then he says he used to be a Christian, but he's not anymore. Is that good information to know? Yes. Then he says, I used to be a preacher's kid. John, you used to be a preacher's kid? How could that happen? Did your dad die? He said, no, my dad didn't die. My dad's no longer a preacher anymore, that's all. Oh. In fact, my dad's no longer a Christian. Oh. Is that important to know? Oh my gosh, here's a guy sitting next to me. You think there's some baggage in this seat right here? Can you imagine if I jumped in with the simple gospel and headed for the goal line? What would he have said? How would he have responded? I have been there, I have done that, and it hurt. But instead, because I'm just moving slowly, I'm asking questions, I'm listening more than talking. I'm getting a picture a little bit of the spiritual topography of John's life. It's appearing before me and I realize, hey, there are some minds out there. And now that I have a picture of some of that, now I can navigate around those minds. You know, one reason that people raise the issue of the problem of evil is because they have experienced profound suffering in their own lives. It's not an academic issue for them, it is personal. You go after the academic issue, you miss the point, you lose them. Do you know why some people ask, do you really believe that abortion's wrong? Even in the case of rape or incest, sometimes they ask that question because that's been their life. And so you go at the academic issue, you miss the personal existential pain that the person is suffering with because of this terrible circumstance. That's why you want information. That's why you ask questions. That's why you listen. Okay? Now I'm going to give you the model first question to help you to do this. The model first question is, what do you mean by that? Now, it's a general question. It's a model question. You could use it in lots of different ways. That's the question I asked of the witch in Wisconsin who's wearing the jewelry. What do you mean by that jewelry? Does that jewelry have religious significance? Okay. But it can also be used to apply when people offer challenges to you. Well, you shouldn't be pushing your morality on me. Okay, well, I have a question. Exactly how am I pushing my morality on you right now? Now, the reason they think I'm pushing my morality is because I think I'm right, which is why they're also calling me intolerant, which is why I asked the question, what do you mean by intolerant? Well, you think you're right. Well, great. Well, I have a question. Do you think you're right? Guess what? They do. Everybody thinks they're right. By the way, notice that that was just a question gathering information. I'm being challenged, I'm being opposed, I'm being faulted, I'm being called names because I think I'm right. But of course I think I'm right. Everybody thinks they're right in the things they believe. If I didn't believe that I was right in what I believed, I would not believe what I believe. I would believe something else and believe that was right too. But in this conversation, I'm the only one being called a name. And that's why I asked them, why is it when I think I'm right, I'm intolerant. When you think you're right, you're just right. What am I missing here? So notice how I'm just maneuvering in this conversation here in a standard objection by gathering more information. Okay? People say, well, everything's relative. Okay, well, I've written a book on relativism, so I know what's wrong with that idea because I know what relativism is. Just because a person says everything's relative doesn't mean they know what relativism is. Chances are pretty good, I think I mentioned this a few moments ago, that they're repeating slogans that they've heard and never thought about. So I have a question then. What do you mean by that, relative? What does relative mean? Well, I don't know what they're going to say. But when they explain it, if they can explain it, I have another question. You said everything's relative. What do you mean by everything? Well, everything means everything, doesn't it? Well, wait a minute. If everything is relative in that sense, isn't the statement everything's relative part of everything? Which would make the statement itself what? Relative? Now, some of you kind of missed that. Okay, that's all right. That's the suicide tactic trying to find its way into the conversation a little bit because it's self-refuting. But you see how the questions are being used to get a clarification. Always looking for clarifications. Always work. There are all kinds of things, pushbacks against Christianity that get a footing because they're just unclear. Okay? So when you ask for clarification, this is a big help. Now, there's a problem with it. And the problem is, a lot of times they're not clear on what they just said. They're not clear. By the way, I'm not pointing the finger at the other side because we're not clear either, lots of times too. Okay? So don't be surprised if you get what I call the Simon and Garfunkel response, all right? Yeah, I'm kind of locked in the 60s. I'm just saying it right now. Those two guys wrote a book in 1960, not a book, but a song in 1966 called The Sounds of Silence. Right? It's a beautiful song. But that's what you end up hearing when you ask a person, what do you mean by that? A lot of times it's sounds of silence because they've never thought about it. And now you may be giving them the very first chance that they have to think about a strong opinion they hold. Being clear about it, okay? So that's the first step. The first step is asking the question, what do you mean by that, to gather information about their view. Here's the second step. I'm going to call it reversing the burden of proof. Reversing the burden of proof. Okay, what is the burden of proof? Burden of proof is the responsibility that somebody has to give reasons for a view. Okay, it's the responsibility to give reasons for a view. Who is it in any conversation that bears the burden or the responsibility of giving a reason or a rationale for a point of view? Here's the answer. The person who makes the claim bears the burden. The person who makes the claim bears the burden. In other words, if you say something is so, especially if it's controversial, it's your job to explain why you think it's so. And if you can't give reasons for your controversial view, why should anyone take it seriously? Let me tell you why this is an important step tactically. Because the impulse for Christians, when they hear an opposing point of view, there is no God, everything's relative, Jesus never existed, the Bible's been changed, whatever, when they give their claim, the impulse is to oppose it and try to refute it. And if we take their claim and first try to refute their claim, we have given them a free ride. And we're not going to do that anymore. We're not going to let them have a free ride. In the immortal words of Ricky Ricardo, they got a lot of splaining to do. And so we're going to have them do some of their splaining. That's the way he talked. He was Cuban. I'm not saying all Cubans talk like that, but that guy did talk like that. So we want them to do the splaining regarding their own view. If they advance a view, make a claim that's controversial, especially in the spiritual realm, here's our second Columbo question. Now, how did you come to that conclusion? Now, how did you come to that conclusion? Or what are your reasons for that? Or what is your evidence? Any question that asks them to give an accounting. Because what we're doing here is we're not going to allow those who disagree with us to just tell a bedtime story, to just repeat a slogan against Christianity and let it lay like it's all over and they win. Just because they've said it. No, we got to get more information. First, I want to know what you mean by that. You cash that out. Then I want to know why you believe what you believe. Help me out here. And don't be surprised if you get, once again, the sounds of silence, because oftentimes that's it. People haven't thought these things through. So you're doing them a favor. Now, you're thinking maybe, well, wait a minute, I'm just asking questions. I'm never giving the gospel here. I'm not talking about Jesus. I'm not getting my stuff out there. Look I know there's a bunch of you here that aren't even engaging people because you don't feel you've got anything to get out there, and so you don't feel you have anything to offer. I'm trying to get you off of the bench into conversation to get other people thinking without having to make a case for your own side yet. So this is going to help a whole lot of you get into the garden. You don't have to swing for the fences. You don't have to hit homers. You don't have to even get on base. You just have to get in the batter's box, right? And these questions will help you to do that. Now, there is a way to make your own point. That's the third use of Columbo. You use questions to make your case, to make a point. But I don't have time to talk about that. I think I'm over already, so I'm going to have to close. But I want to tell you, as a friend and a brother who has been down this road a gazillion times, you have no idea how much power and impact there are in just two questions where you don't preach at all. You just ask for clarification and reasons. You will be stunned at what God will do just through those two questions. So you can just make it a rule. Okay, I'm going to get into play. I'm going to get in the garden, and I'm not going to preach to anybody. I'm just going to ask them questions. I'm going to be a student. I'm just going to ask them what they believe and why they believe it as part of a general conversation. And as they're talking, if there's any further ambiguities that come up, you could ask, well, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? And you're going to see something. People can come into conversations about religious issues against Christianity with their sails just absolutely billowing. They are full until you start asking a couple of questions. And when you do, you can just see the wind go out of the sails. You're not trying to make them look foolish or put them on the spot. You're just asking for clarifications they probably do not have. And it gets them thinking. It puts a stone in their shoe. And so now I've fulfilled my promise to you. I told you I would give you a game plan that will allow you to converse with confidence in any situation, no matter how little you knew, or how knowledgeable or aggressive or even obnoxious the other person happened to be. And now you have that. Two questions. What do you mean by that? How did you come to that conclusion? Then you listen and see what God does. Listen, if you don't remember anything else from this morning, always remember this. Take a tip from Lieutenant Columbo and always ask questions. Father, thank you for this time to talk with my friends, my brothers and sisters in Christ, about a way that you used all the time, Lord Jesus, to maneuver in conversations with people. I pray that you will take this simple game plan and you will help them to put it in play, because, as we know, if we don't do it, it don't work. But I pray that my friends would begin doing it, using these questions, and then they will watch as you work to change lives for Christ's sake. Amen.